It's the beginning of a new year again, and I wish you lots of joy, in spite of all the doom and gloom that seems to be around and everything in the papers and so on, all about that. And funnily enough, I was looking at the back at the Grand Design series that I use, and I was looking at the beginning of the third volume, and it was in the early 80s, and was talking about the doom and gloom then too. So nothing has changed in that sense. We seem to go in cycles of from one thing to another, and you wonder about it in terms of the contrast between life in spirit and life on earth. That in spirit, of course, there's no such thing as having to worry about money or so on, or any of the physical conditions, the restrictions of the physical that we have to endure here. And of course it leads to wondering about why does it have to be like that, and going back over, things that we've been talking about before. The purpose of being here on earth is to help us to come to terms with ourselves, to find our own inner strength. And it seems like we're pushed up against the wall from time to time, from year to year, and in the sense of having to survive. And it brings up all sorts of fears for us, particularly, of course, naturally enough, about money, because all this sort of present doom stuff is about the collapse of money markets and so on, and all the things that people had been used to and seem to be sure of. Suddenly they're all uncertain, and we're thrown back on ourselves in a big way. So how do we find that inner strength to be able to cope with it? Of course, Shibaka, naturally enough, and all the material that he has been conveying to me over the years, talks very much about handing over, working with the universe through our guides, to coming to terms with and integrating with our own higher selves. And that's what our guides are helping us to do. And it works. I'm reminded of a story about, well, it's not a story, it's actually an actual happening, that a woman that rang me, this would be now some years ago, and she was ringing from another continent, and she was very worried because her husband had incurred a debt, a pretty big debt, that he couldn't pay off, and it had to be paid by a certain date. And they tried every possibility of finding the money, and nothing had worked. So she rang to see, could I help in some way, could I throw any light on the situation. So all I could tell her was that in working with my guides, that it would be okay, not to worry about it. So that was okay, but then she rang again. This would be about 2 or 3 weeks later, and she said the time was getting closer and closer and nothing had happened. So partly because she was so far away for some reason, I felt more intimidated in a way by the whole thing, but at the same time all I was getting still with it just was that it was going to be okay, and I assured her about that. So she went off, and then again she rang me once more, and it was now only about a week away from the thing and nothing had happened. But I said no, not to worry, to trust, it would be okay. Well then, about 3 weeks later she rang me, and she said, I wouldn't know, it would be surprised at what happened. She said, on the actual date that the money was due to be repaid, her husband had got a totally unexpected refund of income tax, and it met the bill fully. so the situation was solved. Now, it's always difficult when people are in a fix and they don't know where to find the money for the next bill and so on. And naturally enough, it's easy to worry about that, but it can be a great help if we can trust that the universe will help us with it, that we're all part of the whole flow of the universe, we're part of that divine essence, and that we can work with it and maybe hand things over. I used to worry, I must indeed admit that years ago, particularly when I had a lot of responsibilities and very little money, and how would it meet the next bill and so on, you know, and maybe would have borrowed up to the limits of my capacity. But then when I got into this sort of thing and this whole way of life, I let go of that and wouldn't worry anymore about money or whether there would be money to meet bills and so on. And remembering in the way that Shabaka would talk about it, well, that in any case we really don't own anything on earth. We only have a loan of things. We don't carry these material possessions with us, so they're with us for a while. And indeed also our bills, we don't really own them either, you know, but, so that in that sense, if we can detach from them or in some way not become obsessed by them, because of course money is one of the central energies of earth, and the whole world seems to revolve around it. It used to be in the older days, of course, just barter and so on, but money is now the central issue, and we part of our thing of being on earth is to learn how to cope with it and not to become obsessed by it, by lack or so on. In one of the groups that I was working with, a man had a particular affirmation that he found very helpful, and I think a lot of people did. It was something like this: I release my fear of lack, and I gladly welcome the abundance of the universe. I would tend to put in something like as well, and I release my fear of lack, and I gratefully accept and welcome the abundance of the universe. And lack in that sense would be not just money, it could be lack of anything, so that you're actually letting go of it and then handing it over and letting the universe help you with it and going with that flow. So this is maybe it sounds very, very convenient, and perhaps would be hard for people to trust in that when they're in a bind or so on. But it's worth trying. Maybe have a go and see how it feels. Letting go of the worry, letting go of all that attachment and the whole thing about obsession, and then you find a liberation in it, a freedom, and the sense of, well, yes, the things will work out, and maybe when there is a crisis or a seeming crisis, that it will go away. You know, that it may be just a crisis for today or for this week, but it'll go away, and then that we can we'll find that there's something better around the corner. So I hope in chatting about that, it might be in some way reassuring, and in any case, I really, really do hope that 2009 will be a wonderful year for you in every way, in spite of whatever difficulties there may be. So thanks again for listening.